He's like, I'm not leaving without my cello. And he's like, we're not getting your cello. Of course, they go back to get the cello.
Welcome to Gold, Diamonds, and Death, a James Bond podcast. I am your 00 host, Jonathan Watkins. I am a writer for all things under the Cinemasins brand name and a co-host of the Behind the Scenes podcast. Joining me each and every week for this endeavor, he's the co-founder of Cinemasins, co-host of the weekly podcast Recotopia, and many didn't know this, but he asked all of his girlfriends, all of them, to refer to him as Brad Whitaker.
Oh, yeah. God, I forgot about that. I forgot completely about that. I do, in fact.
I don't know, that name just
it doesn't seem like it should be in a Bond movie, does it?
and he's also one of my good friends, Mr. Chris Atkinson. How are you, sir?
Hello, doing all right.
And for those of you that don't know what Brad Whitaker means, we are going to be talking about The Living Daylights this week, and we will definitely be talking about Mr. Whitaker at some point. But we're also going to be talking about a lot of things. This is our first Bond with Timothy Dalton. We're out of the Roger Moore era, and Roger Moore does not show back up. Like, we don't have. That'd be great though if every Bond did that. Like, we just got like a Never Say Never Again with Roger Moore the next time.
Yeah,
or like a Thunderball remake. I guess that would have been. They really should have done that.
Yeah, yeah. Should have just done it for every Bond that retired.
Mad they didn't do that.
Every Bond that retired gets a Never Say Never Again.
We could have had, Rennie Harlan directed that movie we interviewed him for with Pierce Brosnan. They could have just done a Thunderball remake with Pierce Brosnan. Mm-hmm. It would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's dig into this a little bit. So we're gonna start off with our first segment. We're gonna go behind the scenes in a segment we like to call Eon Flux.
This is a journey.
I'm gonna make a movie!
We have to go back, Kate.
Wow, how did you know all that stuff?
I did my research.
I don't understand any of this.
What the fuck is going on?
We are going to dig into the behind the scenes of The Living Daylights. I did want to mention, I get some of my information just online and whatnot, but there is a book I've been reading where I've gotten some of this information from. You should definitely check it out if you want to dig deeper into these films. It's called Nobody Does It Better, and it is by Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross. So, Living Daylights, it's the 15th entry in the official Bond series. It's the 17th film that we're covering. The film premiered on June 29th, 1987 in the UK. It was released in the US on July 31st. And that's more like what the gaps are now. I know like some of the Craig films came out a few weeks before, because you'd see like reviews on Twitter and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first time I can think of where it's been this. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Dr. No, I think, had the longest gap, because Dr. No was released like at the end of 62. And we didn't get it till May of 63. So anyways, released on July 31st, 1987 in the U.S. Opened up the same week as The Lost Boys. Actually.
Oh.
Yeah. 87 was a good year. 87, I don't know if it's like at the prestige of like 99 or anything like that, but like as far as like mainstream releases that were part of my childhood, a shit ton of them came out in 1987.
Mm-hmm.
It grossed $191.2 million worldwide, which is about $473 million in today's dollars. 51 of that was in U.S. and Canada. That'd be about $128 million. It grossed $11 million on its opening weekend in the U.S., made it the largest three-day opening for a Bond film. It, however, did not. It beat Octopussy, was the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
But it did not beat the four-day opening of A View to a Kill. It finished 19th at the box office, which is the lowest, definitely. But that has a lot to do, too, with, like, there's just more, like we talked about in the last episode, there's just more big releases, right?
Yeah.
There's just a lot more, like, tent poles.
Mm-hmm.
Although 87 was the year that 3 Men and a Baby just dominated the box office.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Directed by Leonard Nimoy, of all people, as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it finished 19th. Living Daylights did. It made a little less than Broadcast News, which I'm actually kind of proud that Broadcast News made that much money.
Yeah.
I didn't know it did. And a little more than Eddie Murphy Raw, which I also didn't know made that much money.
Yeah. That was a big deal.
Yeah, it was. I did not get to see that in the theater. I think I had to
I didn't
that
either.
or something. I should mention that, though. This was my first Bond in the theater. Living
Same
Daylights.
here.
Okay. Oh, that's
I think
cool.
it was.
That makes sense, though.
It was either this one or it was License to Kill. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was this one, though.
The reason I remember it was this was because this is my dad didn't go to the movies that much. So this is one of the few movies I actually saw with my dad. So I think that's why I remember it so well. But it was definitely the first one I saw in the theater. I had seen other Bond films before it, but I hadn't seen any in the theater.
Yeah.
And I think there's only one I haven't seen in the theater since. You've probably seen them all in the theater since, but because you were working in the theater for part of the time.
I saw all the Brosnans in theaters.
Yeah, I did too.
And
Quantum of Solace was the only one I didn't see in the theater.
I saw all the Craigs. Did I see no? I did see No Time to Die in theater. So yeah, I've seen them all since then. Yeah.
You saw Spectre in theaters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw all of them. Yeah. Yeah, I saw all of them.
Oh, I didn't mean to give away my opinion to Spectre.
Yeah.
Although, I guess it could change. I could watch that in a few weeks and be like, that movie is badass.
Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think so either.
I already said 3 Minute a Baby was number one that year, but you had Predator, RoboCop, Lethal Weapon, Stakeout, which I don't think that's a popular film, but I love that movie.
Yeah.
I know, just a lot of interesting stuff like that. Lost Boys, I already mentioned. That opened up the same weekend. That was interesting, too, because Living Daylights finished first with 11 million. Lost Boys finished second with a little over 5. So it was about, Living Daylights grossed like twice as much money. And then at the box office, Living Daylights finished 19th and Lost Boys finished 38th. So it was exactly 19 spots down. I don't know. That was just kind of a fun.
Yeah, you also had Fatal Attraction was a big one.
Yeah, that was
year.
number 2
Beverly
at the
Hills
box office.
Yeah, Beverly Hills Cop 2 and Good Morning Vietnam. Those all went over 100 million. And Moonstruck, which I was so surprised that
that was a really popular
The Untouchables.
Movie. I watched Moonstruck for the first time. I watched it maybe in the last 10 years or something because it's one of my wife's favorite movies, and it's really good. It's a really nice movie. Nicolas Cage is really good in it. But anyways, it is surprising because just that movie would not make that kind of money now. So it's bizarre. But yeah, Fatal Attraction was Fatal Attraction's interesting too, because I think that's basically an adult slasher film. And then those became really popular. I guess people really consider them more erotic thrillers. But there's a lot of slasher film elements in those movies. So it's always kind of interesting. It's all of a sudden, so now you like slasher films because, Michael Douglas is in them or something.
Right. Exactly.
Anyway, all right, I'll go ahead. Let's do the cast because we're definitely need to talk about Timothy Dalton. So we'll go to the cast first. Timothy Dalton, this is his first time he's played him. However, as if you've been listening to this podcast, you know that he has been mentioned several times as possibly being in as early as I think Diamonds Are Forever, somewhere around there. It was around when Connery was leaving, in the 70s, definitely.
Yeah, and definitely on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
He was considered for that.
Yeah.
So, and then he was considered again a couple of times with Roger Moore. They weren't sure if Roger Moore was going to come back. I also found out it was interesting. We talked about last week how Roger Moore decided to retire. I did read something when I was reading about this one, though, that Broccoli has always said he let Roger Moore go. I don't know why it matters, but I just thought that was interesting.
You know what? I don't know if I believe any of these stories anymore. It's when you go through the behind the scenes of something, you'll see something where it's they considered this person or whatever, and then it got turned down or whatever. There's been a variety of Americans over the years that have been considered, and by the end of it, it was always he was turned down because he was American. But then there's reports that they, for this movie, tried to get Christopher Reeve in for Bond.
I didn't even read that.
Yeah, and
crazy.
and I look at it's in the IMDb though. It could be anybody who said that.
Yeah.
They could have, it could have been. So I don't know, they always say that, they consider this person and they really wanted this person, and it always comes down to the fact that they're not British most of the time when they get turned down. Sam Neill tried out for this one, and he looks really good in the part too. I saw the clip of him trying out.
He's Australian, right? Or New Zealand?
He's New Zealand.
There were quite a few from that area that were mentioned. It was like
yeah,
they were,
and apparently
like,
everybody loved him except Broccoli. And so Broccoli, I think, was just basically in love with getting Timothy Dalton the role, but
or Brosnan.
Yeah, Brosnan for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, Sam Neill. I also read somewhere where Sam Neill said he didn't want to do it anyways, which I don't know that I believe that. I think that's more just like
Not
a polite way.
That point in his career, I mean, he would have taken Bond.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I did have Sam Neill, but there were a few Australian guys, Brian Brown, who I know mostly from the FX movies.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some people remember him as the crazy guy in Along Came Polly that Ben Stiller's trying to get like insurance for. He's like the base diver guy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in a bunch of stuff. I mean, he's been, but he was one of the ones that was mentioned. Andrew Clark is also an Australian actor. He was mostly known from television. Finley Light was an Australian model who is mostly known for being considered for James Bond film. And so all those, Mel Gibson apparently was never really considered, but I think MGM mentioned him, said, this guy's, which he did Lethal Weapon that year. So clearly Mel Gibson was about to be huge, but Broccoli just said no, which now that's awesome that he said no. But, I just can't picture Mel Gibson doing that either. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
And me either. And that's another one too, where it was like, well, he's not British, so we're not gonna go with him.
Exactly.
So it's like, okay, I don't like who's in charge of all this. It's like if Broccoli has the final say, then why does he even bother with some of these not British people?
I know. Well, and there was another one, this American actor that was mostly known for being on Dynasty, Michael Nader. I saw him mentioned. Like some of these weren't like saying they actually did auditions. It was just people that were like in the mix.
Yeah.
So who knows? Christopher Lambert was another one I came across.
Mm-hmm.
Lambert Wilson, who's in Matrix Reloaded. So a bunch of that stuff. But yeah, no, Sam Neill was like, it was like they make it seem like it was between Neill, Dalton, and Brosnan. Like those were the three that actually like auditioned.
Yeah.
Properly. So Brosnan gets the role. Like he is the one that they go with. I misunderstood this whole story though, because I always thought he couldn't get out of his contract. So what it is Remington Steele canceled. It was canceled, but there was like a 60-day period where I guess it's in the contract. There's like 60 days after they decide to cancel the series where they can option you back, basically. It sounds like an MLB kind of thing, like, or Major League Baseball kind of thing. So once he got announced that he was the front runner for Bond, all of a sudden, like, interest in Remington Steele went like sky high. Like everybody's like, talking about Remington Steele. So then NBC, with like 3 days left in that 60 days, is like, we're going to do another season.
Yeah.
But he still could have been Bond, and they wanted him to be Bond. But Broccoli, and this is why I question that Michael Nader thing, who was on Dynasty. Because Broccoli said that he did not want an actor that was currently on a television series to play Bond, because it's for people that have grown up like in the 2000s and ahead. It's especially in the 80s, like television and film were two very different things. Like it was really hard. Like the people that would go from television to film and actually succeed were so rare. I mean, like Michael J. Fox did, obviously, and there were a few others, but I mean, these people just weren't like they weren't hiring Alan Thicke to be in feature films. He was a TV guy. David Hasselhoff was a TV guy. That kind of thing. It was a very different scenario than it is now, where you have movie stars playing, wanting to be on TV.
Yeah.
So I always thought he couldn't get out of his contract. I thought it was an Indiana Jones thing, but apparently they wanted him to do both, and Broccoli just said, "No, I'm not doing that."
Well,
so he
let him go. It's so weird the way this came down, because it doesn't sound like, was it NBC that was the network of Remington? It doesn't sound like they really wanted to renew Remington Steele at all.
No, they didn't.
And it wasn't until they had the power to prevent him from being James Bond that they decided that they were going to do it, or maybe they thought they could ride that wave of him being Bond.
That's the way I read it.
Okay, and then they go for 5 episodes after that. It's such a shitty thing for them to do. because I mean, you know, it screwed him out of that job at that time, and who knows, could have been forever if that. You never know, but he does eventually get it.
Well, and not only that, but it hurts Dalton because that was a storyline, and I even remember that storyline going on in the news. And I was young. I mean, I was like 9 or 10 when they started, you know, casting and stuff. And I can remember that was on Entertainment Tonight and everything. Like, you know, Brosnan's Bond, now he's not. And Timothy Dalton just kind of looked like, you know, the runner-up, basically. I mean, that's kind of how he was, like, kind of looked at. And I mean, I think there's other things about the films that are just... It was such a drastic change, and we'll talk about this in the review. Such a drastic change from Roger Moore. So you've got that. So people... you know, we're having to work with a bit of it's a Bond. It's probably the darkest Bond we've had, I would say. And some of the Connery films kind of go there, but like this definitely feels like a precursor to what Craig's gonna do. It's almost like they kind of learn their lessons from these. And this has nothing to do with my opinion of these two movies, but it's kind of like they feel like they learned what people didn't like about these two movies, and they were able to kind of incorporate the positives and change some stuff up and then make it work with Craig. Also, the era of film matters too, because in the 80s, we're not in this like dark, broody, you know, superhero period, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, Bond fit more. That kind of Bond just fit more in 2006 than he did in 1987. So a lot of people think, and I kind of agree that this might have actually hurt Dalton a bit, and, you know, which sucks. But they only did 5 episodes of Remington. They claimed after Brosnan got dropped, there was a lot less interest in watching Remington. So I don't think any of that's true. I don't know how they would even know that. Like, but so they only did 5 episodes. It also kind of reminded me, like, people complaining and all that kind of stuff. It reminded me of like an early version of this whole like Henry Cavill not getting to come back as Superman. Like if we had Twitter at the time, people would be like, you know, bring back the Brosnan like errors. I don't know. Anyways. And Brosnan, I like it though, because Brosnan definitely would have been more like Roger Moore, because the Brosnan films are more like the Roger Moore films. And so I like that we get like different Bonds each time. You know, I don't know. For me, that's interesting. Maybe it's not for everybody. After Dalton accepted though, he didn't sign a contract right away. And this other guy's name comes up. Robert Bathurst, and I think he actually auditioned. He's most known, I think. I don't watch Downton Abbey, but that appears to be the thing that he's most known for. So he says he auditioned for the role, but he feels that the only reason they auditioned him was because they needed a bargaining chip to get Dalton to finally firmly agree. Because Dalton had turned it down before, you know, in the past. He always felt he was too young or something, you know, because he was only 40 when he made 87 when they made this. So, you know, he was in his early 30s when they started offering. No, he was like late 20s when they started offering. He was in his 20s when they,
Well, he was 23 or 24 apparently when they offered him, and he said, "I'm too young to do this." And then as it got further and further along, he just, for whatever reason, it was scheduling conflicts or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't remember everything, but I feel like there was one where it was something about like he was already signed to do something else and he couldn't get out of it or something. It wasn't like I don't think it was a TV series. It was something though. There was something going on.
No, well, and even for this, it was. I mean, he had Brenda Starr going on at the time, and he apparently that was like nearly a deal breaker in itself.
Yes.
So
yeah, it was.
Yeah,
that would have been too bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so we got Dalton on board, and we'll definitely talk a lot more about him when we talk about our opinions on the movie. And he might come up again in this too. But the rest of the cast, Miriam Diabo, who I always in my head I think it's Olivia, but there's no way Olivia Diabo would be old enough to play this. But I don't know how different. Actually, I could be wrong because she was older in Wonder Years.
She would have been. No, I guess not. She would have been 18, I believe, when this came out. So probably
I did not look up how old Miriam Diabo was, but she was in her 20s at least, if not.
Yeah, Miriam Diabo was 26 or 27, and Olivia Diabo, who is her cousin, I don't think her sister or anything. Olivia Dabo was 18, I believe,
They
at the time.
look
But
alike,
like,
though.
They do look a lot alike.
And I think that's why I always think they're sisters in my head, you know, because not that cousins can't look alike, but it just and honestly, if you put them side by side, I'd probably be like, okay, no, they're very different.
Yeah,
but
there's some noticeable differences, but yeah, they have a lot of similarities. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Miriam Diabo, she's in this. She had also auditioned for the role, and I might have even mentioned this last week. I don't remember, for Paula Ivanova in A View to a Kill. After they couldn't get, or they decided not to bring Barbara Bach back.
Which they also show in the behind the scenes. They show her auditions for that and everything in there, and it's you can see why that they wanted to bring her back.
So Olivia Diabo, for those who don't know what we're talking about, if you've ever seen The Wonder Years, she's Kevin's older sister. That's the thing I most know her for. But Miriam Diabo, I'm sorry?
Olivia Dabo is also in that movie Greedy, if you ever saw that.
Oh, that's right. She also had a pretty memorable role in Law and Order: Criminal Intent. She played like a serial killer or something. That was always but she was like on multiple episodes because she got under what's his name's skin. God, what's his name? Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Miriam Diabo, she hasn't done a ton. She was in. I'm trying to think if there's anything else even worth mentioning. Not really.
Even on the known for on the IMDb is like, your guess is as good as ours.
A lot of TV, a lot of direct-to-video. She was in this horror movie. Her debut was in this horror movie that's really wild called Extra. I don't know that I recommend it, but it's different. So for one of the villains was going to be a KGB general, and so General Gogol eventually was going to be that character who we've seen in a lot of the other movies, played by it was Gotel, Walter Gotel. He played General Gogol in a few of these movies recently, and but he was really sick at the time, and so he couldn't be there for and John Rhys Davies, and is it John Rhys? Is that right?
John Rhys Davies.
John Rhys Davies. That's I always get the Davies. I always want to say Davis. Davies. He ends up playing Leonid Pushkin, General Pushkin, who's a new character they create, and he's not in the movie that much. So I'm guessing Gotel was not well off at that time. But Gotel does get to show up for a cameo, kind of near the end. But we've got John Rhys Davies. We've got Jodan Baker as the infamous Brad Whitaker.
Brad Whitaker, a guy who likes to do Civil War reenactments and stuff like that.
Which that reminded me like of a Columbo episode with what's his name? The prisoner. What's that guy's name? McGowan. Patrick.
Oh, Patrick McGowan.
Yeah, where he plays like. But actually, I might even be thinking of a different one. He plays a military guy in one, but there's one, I think maybe this is one of the later ones. There's one with this military guy, and that's the big thing. Like they're giving him this birthday present. It's like a Civil War like model thing.
Yeah.
But that's what it reminded me of. But also, when I started thinking about it, like Jodan Baker kind of feels like a Columbo villain in this movie.
Yeah, he does. It's very much like that. Very much like that. And even the way he's confronted at the end is like Columbo in a way too. Yeah.
But Brad Whitaker, just that name just doesn't work. I don't know why, but that sounds like somebody's going to do my taxes. It doesn't. It doesn't sound like somebody I should fear. And on top of that, it's Jodan Baker, which he can be good. I mean, I'm not going to... Jodan Baker's not terrible.
Jodan Baker is one of these guys who fits a very specific type.
Yes.
And so, yes, in a way, he's the character actor, like almost Keanu Reeves-like in a way that... you have to put him in as this. He's always got to be like a gruff, kind of an asshole kind of a guy. Like he shows up as the Whammer and the Natural, and
he comes back in the Brosnan Bond films as a completely different character.
Yeah, and I mean he made his name in Walking Tall, and I believe it was Conrack was the other movie that he did in the 70s where he was a teacher. So Walking Tall was his big claim to fame, and then he sort of did like a lot of this character actor stuff where he's always like the sort of a kind of a southern redneck asshole kind of guy or whatever. So that's what the seemed like the breadth of his work was from that point.
Yeah, and if anybody has not seen the Mystery Science Theater 3000 episode of Mitchell, which is which is a Joe Don Baker.
It's a fantastic.
It's one of my
Mystery
favorites.
Science Theater. Yeah.
I haven't seen all of the episodes or anything, but that's definitely one that I've gone back to a few times. Mitchell.
Yeah. Looking at this, I think Conrack was something else.
Conrack?
Maybe. That was maybe John Voight.
I think you're right. I think that is John Voight.
Yeah, it was John Voight. Who, same guy.
Really, Voight might be a little better actor, but like they do kind of fit the same mold. Like, and they're like, I do know John Voight in real life is super conservative. I don't know that Joe Don Baker is, but he definitely kind of comes.
I have no idea.
Yeah, but he is one of those guys you like look at. You're like, that looks like my like super conservative uncle that drinks a lot or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't mean that mean. I'm sure Joe Don Baker is the greatest person ever to live. But,
he is.
It's not his fault they named him Brad Whitaker. So
that's very true.
but I don't know. We'll talk about that review. Art Malik is in this, who I don't know that I had ever seen except for True Lies. I mean, I probably have and just didn't realize it, but he's the main villain in True Lies. He's not really a villain in this, though. He's like a rebellion leader. Or whatever.
He's the Mujahideen or whatever, the Mujahideen, which is I think in the the 80s the United States sort of rallied around these guys because they were fighting the Soviets and everything, and then as time moved on, I don't know if they. This is me being ignorant of history, okay? I don't know if they turned into Al-Qaeda or if they broke off into Al-Qaeda or whatever like that.
Yeah, no, it's something like that.
I believe Osama bin Laden was a Mujahideen or whatever at one point, but it's fun. I don't know. It's interesting to watch being friends with with this group. In the movie. So anyway,
this movie is interesting historically because of that, and the Cold War is over like 2 years after this. So
yeah.
It's bizarre. It's almost like you watch it now and you're like, I think maybe that's the wrong villain. But I like Art Malik. I think he's good. I should go back to the villains though. I totally forgot to mention Jerome Crabb, who's in the.
It's a Yaroon Krabbe, I believe is how. I mean, it's a tough name. I don't blame you. I was looking up interviews, and one of them, I could hear him. I think he says Yaroon Krabbe, but there's also in the behind the scenes, thankfully, Patrick McNee is a game to say the name as well, and I think that's how it is. Yaroon Krabbe. People who know him from The Fugitive.
Yeah,
he's Dr. Charles
like the
Nichols.
main thing I know him from. In this, he's General Georgy Kuskov. Georgy. They always say Georgy. It kind of gave me that Jiminy feeling when I was watching First Man. Because I'm that's Georgy. To me, I mean, obviously it's not, but that's just how I would pronounce it. And then there's so many fucking villains in this movie, by the way, especially if you count Pushkin, which I guess you kind of have to because he is going to buy a bunch of guns. But there's a henchman named Nikros. It's the guy from it's one of the henchmen from Die Hard. It's Andreas.
It's
Wisniewski.
It's wasn't it his Carl's brother? Isn't that who he plays?
He's the one that gets sent down with the shirt that says "I've got a machine gun now." Okay.
Yeah. He's that guy. He looks a tad bit different in this because he's got glasses on in Die Hard, and he is also known for being one of the villains in Mission Impossible. I mean, one of the henchmen kind of guys in Mission Impossible. So he's got. Yeah, the very first Tom Cruise Mission Impossible. And I think he shows up later in another installment in 5 or 6. But anyway, that guy's got a look. He's got a great look. Andreas Wisniewski he's got an amazing look that's just you remember instantly. Like, oh, I've seen this guy in a bunch of stuff. Even though you may not know his name.
So we had Desmond Llewellyn's back as Q, Robert Brown's back as M, Jeffrey Keane is the Minister of Defense. We already mentioned that Gotel comes back and makes a bit of a cameo. We also get Felix back because, we always have to have Felix. But John Terry, who I always call Dr. Christian Shepherd from Lost. That's the only other thing I know him from. Actually, he's been in quite a few things, but that's the main. Yeah, no, he's been in a lot.
Full Metal Jacket. He's got a brief little moment. Yeah.
I also get him confused with the dad in My So-Called Life sometimes.
Oh yeah, he does kind of look like that guy a little bit.
Kind of. Once again, if you put them together, they wouldn't look anything alike.
No.
But in your head, you just see a certain type of person.
Yeah.
They both had that kind of receding hair going at the same spot. And all that kind of stuff. But he shows up as Felix Leiter for just a little bit. And we have a new Moneypenny, played by Caroline Bliss, who really didn't do a ton outside of this. I think she's in License to Kill as well.
Yeah, she is.
But so she replaced Lois Maxwell, which was sad to see her go. But things happen.
Mm-hmm.
People have to move on with their lives. I get it. Let's see. So this film was shot at Pinewood Studios, along with this place called Weisensee, which is in Austria. There were also a few other areas in Austria they shot, and in Gibraltar.
Mm-hmm.
The pre-title sequence was filmed at the Rock of Gibraltar.
Yeah.
Which was a really fun sequence. We also got the return of the Aston Martin. 2 different models were used. I did not list the models because they have no meaning to me.
Right.
But there were 2 different models. I remember at the time it was a big deal because that's another thing I remember about seeing this in the theater, because my dad's second wife at the time, my stepmother at the time, she kept talking about that. Like, it was like, at the time, I think it was like the most expensive car that was made. And that was like a big thing. Mm-hmm. So, I just have weird memories of that being a big deal. But it was also like, when you go back and watch the Connery Bonds and stuff like that, I guess I get it more. I'm just not a car guy. So anyways, that pre-title sequence, by the way, that I was talking about, it involves this chase with this Land Rover, and like Dalton's on top of it and all that stuff. What's crazy though is like that stretch of road is actually really long, but for whatever reason they only used like a little bit of it, and they just kept changing the angles. So it just looked like they were going all. But I was just like, why didn't you just use the whole road? Maybe they couldn't for some reason. But
it's probably what it was.
Or maybe it would have been more dangerous. Dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk. They did shoot the scene that when it actually goes in the water, that is at a place in the UK called Beachy Head.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was apparently Dalton just got done with Brenda Starr on Friday. Flew out to Gibraltar. Oh, so finished it on Saturday. Flew out to Gibraltar on Sunday and started filming this on Sunday.
It's crazy.
Yep.
And just being thrown into that, like that's your scene. Like you couldn't even get like a warm up scene, like with him and Miriam Diabo or something, just talking about bullshit.
And they also did a thing where they put in two agents that get shot or killed at the beginning. Are supposed to mimic Roger Moore and George Lazenby, so that you will have an idea. Like, you won't have an idea of who it is, even though everybody knows who it is. Who 007
I thought that was weird too, because I remember thinking that, like, they're really trying to cover this up, but it's like, but we all know it's Timothy Dalton. Like, I mean, and even then, we all knew it was Timothy Dalton. It was all over, the news.
I guess they feel like they could hold out some hope that nobody knows before they watch the movie, or they didn't see a trailer, or they're all dicer. I don't know.
Or they just feel like, they feel like that sets it up better. I don't get it. It's just kind of annoying. It's just like I don't want to see his feet. Just fucking show him.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's a really cool. It's one of the better pre-title sequences we've seen.
It is. It's very good.
Especially after View to a Kill.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't play the Beach Boys, guys.
Yeah. It's cool to see like a training exercise turn actually deadly, and there's like, somebody who's not on the level and all of that.
I had forgotten about that when I was watching it. I'd forgotten it was just a training exercise.
Yeah.
Because what a wild training exercise that is. So yeah, as far as in like directing and writing, nothing's changed. We've got John Glenn. He's back for I guess this is his third. He's for
this fourth,
no,
right?
Fourth. That's right. And he'll be back for his final film next week. Richard Maybaum and Michael G. Wilson wrote the script. I don't think that's a surprise.
Nope.
Maybaum said he really liked the short story they were basing it on, but there just wasn't enough there to make it a 2-hour movie. So he said while it was one of the more difficult screenplays that he had to write for the series, it was also maybe the most fun. And he also said originally the story was going to take place in China. They had even they had gone to China and talked to the government, scouted, but at the end of the day, they just found it was going to be too expensive. Broccoli also wanted to film some stuff in Russia, and he went over there and met with their government. And when he said he wanted to film, they were cool. But then when he said it was James Bond, they were like, no. So that's why we're going to Austria and stuff like that. Because they did say they did. And apparently he claims that they started giving him other ideas for movies that he could do. They wanted him to adapt these Russian stories and stuff. And he was like, I'm good. I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny. It's no, you can't do Bond, but we have this story about a dog that we would, whatever.
Yeah.
Early drafts were a prequel, or some even were a direct prequel to Dr. No. So it was going to be a young James Bond, fresh out of the day. It sounds very similar to Casino Royale in some ways, although there was, and it also kind of reminds me of No Time to Die, because there is another 007, because Bond is just out of the Navy, and then Bond gets partnered up with this guy, and then he dies, and then Bond takes on the 007 mantle, which also kind of plays into the idea that there's more than one James Bond. I don't know what this guy's name was, though. I don't think it was James Bond, but who knows? But that kind of plays in with that idea. But it also what was I going to say? I don't know. It sounds like it's like an origin story basically, and I guess that's why they eventually just decided against it. And plus, I guess Dalton wouldn't have been able to play the part because he would have been too old. So
yeah.
So anyways, the other agent was actually, I did write this down. He was named Burton Trevor, which was a mixture of Richard Burton, and I don't remember who the Trevor was. Trevor Young, maybe? I can't remember. But it was Richard Burton was the Burton part. And then, like I said, some of the drafts even had to be a direct prequel to Dr. No. Did you have something else to say about that, though? You were nodding when I mentioned it.
No. I just this is something that I heard, and that by the end of this movie, he was going to get his mission for Dr. No.
Yes.
At the end of the movie, that was sort of the plan. So yeah.
But it's where do you go from there? Because then do you just remake Dr. No? I don't even know how. Maybe that's partly why they ended up not doing it.
Yeah, no idea.
But they eventually. It's interesting to see the parallels to what eventually happens with Craig. There's a lot going on here. I think that's similar. Even though that's not really what Casino Royale is about, but at the beginning of Casino Royale, we kind of see how he gets his 007 credentials and all that kind of stuff. But Alec Mills is the director of photography on this. He was actually really shocked to get the job because he hadn't done much. He was actually working on King Kong Lives, which was this really bad movie from the 80s with Linda Hamilton. He was shocked to get the job because he had been working very long. But Alan Hume, who's been the guy on quite a few before this, he wasn't able to do it. So they hired Mills. Mills also said that John Glenn wanted it to look like The Third Man. I don't know that it does, but that's what he said he wanted it to look like.
I mean, it doesn't at all. Let's just put that out there. The one thing, and we're going to get to this anyway, but they do have a carnival scene in this movie that they shot the Third Man. They shot the actual Third Man at, and they shot it at the exact Ferris wheel and everything that the Third Man. John Glenn, his first movie he ever worked on was The Third Man. And there were several other people who have done Bond films who started on that film as well. But yeah, if you ever watch The Third Man and Living Daylights back to back, let me know and tell me if you think that those movies look anything alike in any way whatsoever. It's weird. I actually started rewatching The Third Man. I didn't have any idea about this Living Daylights connection at all. I haven't finished it, but I started it up the other day, just cause I wanted to see it again. And just from the first 15 minutes of The Third Man, I can tell you that The Living Daylights has almost nothing visually to do with that movie.
And is that No, Touch of Evil is the one, or is that the one with the Orson Welles character, like the famous like introduction? I can't remember. Is it Touch of Evil or is it Third Man? I think it's Third Man, where he kind of comes out of the shadows. I think it's Third Man, right?
What's the full?
It's Orson
what
Welles.
Are you saying?
He just he's Harry something. Is that Third Man?
Oh yeah, he does come out in the Third Man, and it comes out of the shadows towards like about
Third Man is fucking great. I mean, it's one of the greatest movies ever made. So I recommend if you haven't seen it. Touch of Evil's worth watching too. Touch of Evil is fucking great. Too.
Yeah, Touch of Evil is good too.
Man, yeah. So he also said it was a really hectic shoot because they were. Like, and I don't know if them trying to get to China and then trying to get to Russia set them back really far, but they were basically like scouting locations and setting up stuff, storyboarding stuff before they actually got permission. They were so rushed. Okay, so Peter Lamont is back as the production designer, who's kind of been the post. Oh my God, I just forgot his fucking name.
Ken Adams.
The post Ken Adams, right? And he's like, I mean, he's been fine. I mean, there's been some really cool set. There's a really cool set on this movie with a plane. But Lamont claims that it was a really hectic shoot because they were storyboarding and setting up stuff before they even had permission. I don't, from like the governments and stuff, like in Morocco and in Vienna and or in Austria and whatnot. And I think a lot of that had to probably do with they were kind of getting rushed because they had all these other things they were going to film at, and then they couldn't, and then they just kept getting behind. And plus all these scripts had been written, and it was just, it got to a point where I don't know how they got all this done in 2 years. I got to be honest. Like when you read about it, you're just like, I don't know what you guys were doing.
Yeah. I didn't know how they did it either because they didn't have a Bond cast. They didn't have a script complete. But how in the world they do it? Yeah.
But I think I've heard in the past that like when Dalton got signed on, like you said, I mean, he was doing Brenda Starr and he immediately came on set, but like I don't even think he had been signed much before that. Like it had just been like maybe 3 weeks or something. And they did change some of the script when they signed him because they knew he wasn't going to be like Roger Moore. So they did have to kind of change things around. But yeah, the Hercules plane is what it's called. And that was like a huge problem, but they did a really good job. I had no idea. Like, it's hard to tell what's a set and what's not. Like, I went back and watched it after I read all this. It's a really fascinating sequence. I think it is funny, though, once again, I love when people say things like, this is a more realistic Bond. Like, what is that? Like, because there is nothing like... I wouldn't call that realistic. I don't know.
It means that there's not... It means that there's not like a villain in there with this weird like off the wall plan and like this strange layer that's impossible and all that. I think they try to talking about something that's more grounded in reality where and they're not talking about lasers killing, millions of people and all that. It's more about we're just going to like sell opium or we're going to sell guns or something like that. That's I think what they mean. But yeah, the plane sequence that you're talking about, they with the I guess the Range Rover or whatever that's driving like that Miriam Dabo drives into it or the Hercules plane or whatever like that. Apparently you can't you can't have the back of it open while it taxis or something like that. So they couldn't have it. They couldn't have it open, so they had to build this thing like a van. It was like a van, like a big van, like the biggest van that they could find or whatever, that they could show this thing going up into, and it made it kind of look like it was in the plane, even though if you were like an expert on Hercules planes, you'd know it wasn't the same thing. But like for us, we're watching it, we have no idea.
No, we don't. And like I said, they built all that interior stuff, like the they redid the cockpit and the cargo bay, the exterior around the cargo bay. And then obviously they had the plane, they had a plane actually in the air and they had a bunch of stuntmen doing like the, all the fighting and stuff. And I mean, the cuts between those two things are seamless. Like it's like, I had no idea. Like, I mean, if you told me they were up in the air doing all that, I'd be like, sure. That's what it looks like. Yeah,
that stunt with them out on the
on the
bag.
netting?
Yeah, the netting and everything. And they're like, so you have like, apparently like okay, it's fun because they've had continuity with stunt people for a really long time on these movies, action coordinators, all that. But like the stunt people, you keep seeing these same faces every time when they talk about a stunt, and this guy's hanging on for dear life. Like I'm sure I don't think they talked about it this time, them having the hidden parachutes or anything this time, but like they're hanging on to this thing, and like. Apparently it's flapping in the wind so bad that he's worried that he's going to hit his head on the plane. Like that's how bad it's going. Like, and he had to like dodge it. I think he had to dodge getting hit a couple of times doing that. So
that sequence, that was one of those that I read about, and it just impressed me all the more. And like you were like, what was I going to say? Like, and I think my thing, when I say realistic, like I don't care. It's a movie. I don't expect it to be like, but you do have to make me believe that what you're doing is happening, I guess. And this definitely does that, you know. And there's that whole bit where he's like cutting off the ties on his shoes and all that stuff, and it's just like, man.
Yeah. Well, and also the scene where he drops the bomb on the bridge. Apparently, that's an insane amount of work they had to do on that, because they had to. They had a real life location, but the bridge was like too short or something like that. So they built this miniature, with a forced perspective, where you see it and it looks like this huge bridge, right? And then like it doesn't look at all like it's a miniature or anything like that. But when they blow it up, that's like cutting seamlessly to the studios in Pinewood, and they've built like a quarter version of that bridge to blow up and everything, and so it all looks very seamless. So very, very well done. And this is, like I said, these are some people who've been doing Bond films for, at this point they've been doing them since I think most of the people who are on these have been doing them since the 70s. So they all have like a whole bunch of just a huge amount of knowledge on how to make it look right and everything. So if there's anything that you want to talk about with the Timothy Dalton Bonds, the stunts and the special effects and all that, those are all top notch.
Well, exactly. And Dalton could even do some of his own stuff because he was younger than Moore. I mean, those last few Moore films, Moore was just getting up there where he couldn't do all the stuff.
It just looked bad.
Yeah, so they started doing like the karate chops and all that stuff. But, Dalton's actually like, it's physical fights and stuff like that. It's just, I agree.
When he's the one, he's hanging on to the top of that that Jeep or whatever at the beginning of the movie. And
I mean, it's not Tom Cruise levels necessarily, but he's doing more. He's doing a lot more than Moore could have been doing. Right. If they had brought Moore back, I don't know what that movie would have been. No. I don't think that was ever really considered, but it's funny.
Yeah.
The cello sled scene, Miriam Diabo talked about that.
Yeah.
She was like in charge of like controlling it, which she said was really hard because Dalton was just heavier than her, so she couldn't keep it in a straight line. And for those who don't know what we're talking about, there's a Miriam Diabo is in an orchestra. She plays cello, so they have to get down this hill. So they take the cello out of the case and hold it and use it to kind of steer the case, and then they slide down.
Yeah, which is the thing that they behind the scenes they built with a pair of skis and this way to control it and all that. But apparently it was really hard to do it. But that's a pretty funny sequence because he's. Dalton is can't believe it. Like, first off, she's like, I need to get my cello after they've gotten away from the bad guys. And she's like, there's no way they're gonna know that you're not there in 10 minutes or whatever. And he's like, I'm not leaving without my cello. And he's like, we're not getting your cello. Of course they go back to get the cello. And then later on, when they actually need the cello case, he's like, remind me to tell it's like, it's a good thing that I insisted that you bring your cello.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
she also said they had those explosives in the snow that were popping as they went along. That was really freaking her out, which I'm sure, I mean, it would freak me out. So.
That was one of the funnier parts of the behind the scenes, the way they edited it, because one of the stunt coordinator guys was like, "Oh, they were having a ball doing that scene," and then they would cut to Miriam Dabo, and she'd be like, "I hated every minute of doing that scene." He goes, "Yeah, they were having a lot of fun." He's like, "No, really, I hated every minute of it." So
it reminds me, there's this movie called The 7 Ups. It's like this 70s like cop thriller with Roy Schneider, and Richard Lynch, the actor, he plays one of the villains. And there's this amazing car chase sequence. I don't know how easy that movie is to come across, but 7-Up, if you're really into car chases, the 7-Ups has one of the best. But Richard Lynch is in the car with the stunt driver. So, like, every time you see Richard Lynch's face, like, he is freaking the fuck out. And it's like actual him freaking the fuck out. Because this guy was driving the car all crazy because he was a stunt driver.
Yeah.
And Richard Lynch is sitting there thinking, holy shit, I'm going to die. So it's just kind of one of those. It's like you're getting, like, I love that when you get, like, natural, actual reactions from the actors. Not that I want the actors put through hell or anything, but it's just, I don't know. That kind of just reminded me of that. Her fear, her screams are totally 100% legit. Like, she's not pretending.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's funny. I need to watch that behind the scenes.
It kind of reminds me of talking about Miriam Dabo and her and like it's the previous movie, Grace Jones.
Yeah,
they did a whole bunch of stuff there where they didn't tell her that those were fake explosives or whatever, and like she was freaking out when they were blowing up,
which is also terrible. Like, God, I've heard, and there's, like, you can read, like, Cameron will do stuff like that where he doesn't he doesn't tell people, like, even the stunt people, he doesn't tell them things. I don't get that, but whatever, that's a whole other thing. Yeah, but yeah, really some really exciting action sequences. Did you have anything more on, like, the production or?
No, I mean, most of the stuff in the behind the scenes is talking about how tough all the stunt stuff was. The selection of Timothy Dalton and all of that is a big deal in there, and it gets more and more about that now in these behind the scenes. So there's not much else to really. I don't think there's anything else that I can remember talking about on it.
It's crazy, and there's a lot of things that factor into this. We already mentioned Timothy Dalton being a little younger, but I don't know if that they were willing to go a lot more extra. But it's like, this just felt bigger, even though it's like it's a much smaller story. Like you said, it's just basically a guns story. Like, it's illegal, buying guns for wars or whatever. So it's not a super, like, extravagant plot.
Yeah, nobody's a big, huge villain in this. Like, there's a lot of part villains in this.
But it does feel like it's more intense, and the stunt stuff feels a lot bigger than it had been the last few films. And we're talking about a movie that followed up a movie where there was a fight on top of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's still, like, I wasn't like in suspense watching that,
No.
whereas in this, sometimes, even though I know Dalton's not going to die, but, like, I've seen the movie, but I don't know. It seemed a little more, it was more intense. Let's put it that way. Let's talk about the music real quick. It's the final Bond film to be composed by John Barry. Soundtrack is notable. I don't know exactly what this means, but I went ahead and wrote it down because they said it was notable. For using sequenced electronic rhythm tracks, which they overdubbed with an orchestra. That's something that's more common now, or at least over the last, like, couple decades, but no one was doing it back then. So Barry's kind of considered one of the guys that was at the beginning of that, where there was a lot more electronic and stuff like that included in. Living Daylight's title song was co-written. It was Barry, and then it was co-written with I could not find out how to pronounce this guy's last name. His name is Pal Waaktaar is what I'm going to go with.
Oh.
It's Waaktaar, but he is the lead. He is in the group Aha.
Yeah.
And Aha, the group, actually recorded the song as well.
Yep.
And it is called The Living Daylights, and we will talk about that later.
Yep.
There is another version of this song that Aha preferred, which I could not find. I mean, I was trying to find it on YouTube. I guess I could have looked at my music app, but there's another version of this that Aha preferred, and it's available on their album, which is called "Stay on These Roads." From what I could tell, though, it's a toned down version of it, because the James Bond version's got, like, the orchestra and all that stuff, and I think it's just a little more. Living Daylights was the first film to use a different song over the closing credits.
Yeah.
Which I guess that means that had a song over the opening, because obviously Dr. No was different, but that doesn't count.
I think they're basic focused on what the theme song, when they started making real theme songs for it.
Yeah. The song over the closing credits is called "If There Was a Man." It's performed by Chrissie Hynde of the Pretenders.
Yep.
Who I've seen in concert.
Oh, nice.
They opened for the B-52s.
Oh, well, there you go. You probably saw that concert back in 1991.
Huh?
You probably saw that concert back in 1991.
No, actually, it was a little later. It was their second album. It was not their second album. It was the album after Love Shack.
Mm-hmm.
And that album might not have been called Love Shack. I don't think it was. But
I don't know.
Anyways, yeah, I think it was like 90. I want to say it was 96 is what I want to say.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong. But anyways, there's a lot of classical music in this because Diabo plays a cellist. Mozart's 40th Symphony in G minor, Borodin's String Quartet in D major, and the finale to Act 2 of Mozart's The Marriage of Figaro, which talking about all that makes me want to go watch Amadeus right now. But I just thought I'd mention those for the classical fans that I'm sure we have a ton listening to us.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bunch of people working on their own operas and stuff. Yeah, so that's kind of what the music. The reception, the reviews were very mixed. Rita Kempley of the Washington Post said Dalton was the best Bond ever. Roger Ebert hated it. He thought Dalton was just okay. He was kind of really kind of mean about Diabo. And he really hated Joe Don Baker. Siskel didn't like it either, and for some reason, it was so funny reading that and just being reminded that they both gave Speed two thumbs up.
Yes, they did.
It's like, why did I ever listen to these people? I mean, that's not why. I mean, you don't have to agree with a critic to like them, but it's still interesting.
It's a lot of times it's where you are and what mood you're feeling and what anticipation. That's the reason why those anomalies happen a lot of times.
Yeah, and it's like, if you're just like, especially in the summer, man, if you're watching like shit after shit and then all of a sudden something's not like the worst thing you've ever seen, it's like it feels like so much better than it is.
Yeah, although I still don't know how that would have applied for Speed 2, but yeah, I mean, there's a thing there where, I mean, I can see you being in a weird, like, state and you watch that and you're like, oh man, this Willem Dafoe performance is all over the top. I love it. And you just whatever.
Well, imagine how bad it would be without Willem Dafoe in it. Like that would be.
Yeah, it would.
Oh my god.
I know. It'd be such a fucking.
He's the only thing worth watching in that movie. Retrospective reviews are much more positive. Most noting they like the realistic approach and showing the darker side of Bond. So, and maybe that is why the Daniel Craig films became so huge.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's kind of, I feel like there's a reasoning there, though. I feel like people are going like, because it feels that way like throughout. Like you got Connery, it's fairly serious, and then Lazenby. I don't know what Lazenby. I'm not even counting Lazenby. I don't know what that is. But you got Connery's fairly serious. Roger Moore is definitely what I think a lot of people when they think of Bond, that's what they think of. Like he's joking, one-liners. A lot more flippant about things. And then you've got a couple of Daltons. He's pretty serious. And then Brosnan's more like Moore. I don't think he's quite as silly as Moore, but he's definitely more like him. And then you go to Daniel Craig. So it's kind of like you go back and forth. So I'm really hoping the next one, I don't know that they will, but it'd be interesting to see if they went a little lighter, or a little, not lighter is not the word, but if they're going to be more like Brosnan and Moore on the next one. There's rumors out there, people like Aaron Taylor Johnson are in the running, and that kind of makes me think it might be that more like a Brosnan kind of Bond, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. I mean, yeah, I think that's right. Like they try to kind of like, balance what they did the last time. Out and everything, and so yeah, it'd be cool to have like a sunnier Bond on this next one, and Aaron Taylor Johnson would be a pretty good one.
Oh no, I have no itch. It always works. I mean, people will complain, whoever it is, but like, Lazenby's not great by any means, but like that movie still kind of rules, and Connery, Moore, Brosnan, and Craig have all made good Bond films. I don't know. It doesn't really concern me. Like they've never not had somebody that could pull it off. So, but anyways,
yeah, I think. I mean, we'll get to how we think of Dalton here later. So,
yeah, we're about to do that actually. We are going to talk about the movie itself, And this is a segment we like to call a review to a kill.
I've got you in my sights.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
There's no need to shout. I'm not shouting.
Why don't you stop your whining and get on with it? I've heard this shit before.
We are going to give you our thoughts on whatever film we are discussing this week. And this week we are discussing The Living Daylights. Let me give you a little plot analysis here, which is, IMDb provides such great plot summaries. James Bond is sent to investigate a KGB policy to kill all enemy spies and uncover an arms deal that potentially has major global ramifications. That's all you're getting. That's your plot. But that's about it. I mean, it's not, as we've said, it's not a really involved plot. There's not a lot of plot. It's they're trying to buy guns from Joe Don Baker, and there's this whole thing where the Crabbe, how do you say you pronounce his last name?
Jeroen Krabbe.
His character is defecting, which ends up kind of being like a double cross kind of scenario, where they're basically him defecting as part of the Soviet plan to do all this. John Rhys Davies is going to procure the weapons from Brad Whitaker. Also, we forgot to mention Brad Whitaker, when you enter his house or whatever that is, he has all these world leader statues or whatever. And it's all like the most evil sons of bitches. It's like Hitler and Genghis Khan. It's Napoleon and
although I don't know, Napoleon wasn't evil.
No, that's true. I should have said evil, but
yeah,
Hitler is.
I don't even know if there was a Hitler. Was there a Hitler in there?
Well, now you're having me question that. I think so.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a Hitler. I don't know. Anyway, it's people he aspires to that had like great military victories and things.
Yes,
like
he's really into military victories, and he plays out battles in his office with his toys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and famously in the Civil War reenactment at the end, he's like, "Boy, Lee could have won that if he just did what he was supposed to do." I'm like, God damn, you wanted Lee to win, huh?
Timothy Dalton, first are both of our first maybe theatrical experiences. You're not positive if it says your License to Kill, but Timothy Dalton is both of our first Bonds, basically. Yeah. So what did you think about your rewatching of So you had seen The Living Daylights. Was this the first one you had seen as a kid, I guess, that we've talked about?
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
I remember License to Kill more because of Robert Davi being in it, but I don't know why Robert Davi was so memorable about License to Kill. But I am almost certain that I started my Bond watching with The Living Daylights. I just didn't remember much about this movie, and I've not seen it since that 2006 run of going through all this stuff and everything. But so I don't know what I thought when I was a kid. I have no idea what I thought. I know that when I watched this particular movie back in the run in 2006, I was like, this is a lot better than I remember this being. And I know that there was this, this hatred of Dalton for some reason. Like, I understand he's not Moore or Connery, but every new guy is going to have to go through this because they have a different interpretation of the character and everything. There are some lines that they get Timothy Dalton to say that are classic Bond things that seem a little bit too rushed and don't seem like his character whatsoever. When he says Bond, James Bond, it's very rushed. Like, Bond, James Bond, blah, 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 blah. Let's just get that out of the way. And then, he goes to that hotel and they tell him, "Oh, you want a vodka martini?" And he's like, shaken, not stirred. Yeah. It's just it's more of an acknowledgement that those are lines in Bond movies than it is this guy taking ownership over those lines. But I really like Timothy Dalton in this movie.
Timothy Dalton's a great actor. I think, first off,
Yeah, I mean, License to Kill's not, which comes next, is not a great movie at all, and I think at that point people are like, I don't know, there's definitely something not working, but it's not Dalton, I don't believe. But once you have a couple of what you could perceive as failures, I guess you're just like, all right, we're just going to scrap everything. But I think he's really good in this, and it's, if there is an issue with The Living Daylights, it's not Dalton.
No.
It's more about, for me, the plot, which I know that these movies are never really about a coherent plot. We said it's very simple, but it's also like a lot of moving parts
absolutely.
in this plot.
It can, simple is probably not the right word.
No, it's simple. For real, it is. Like, it's people buying arms, and it's selling arms to different people, and blah,
the villains'
blah.
motives are very simple compared to most Bond films, for sure.
Yes, yeah. There's no giant, huge plan to put, like, we've been dealing with space lasers. We've been dealing with ships swallowing other ships. We've been dealing with all these, like, big time, big scale world things. This is more of a, in this part of the world, this thing is going on. Like that General Georgy Koskov character, like they try so many, like, back and forth things on him. First, he's one of the good guys. He's asked for Bond specifically to protect him at this opera, or this orchestra thing or whatever. And Bond makes these very on spur of the moment decisions. His job is to kill whoever's trying to kill him, but he decides not to kill Miriam Dabo at the beginning of the movie because he's like, oh, well, she doesn't look like a sniper or whatever. So it's like, okay. And so he helps Georgy get out using that Trans-Siberian pipeline, putting him in that little, like, tube or whatever, and shooting him across over to Western Europe and everything. And then then he gets kidnapped, and then we find out, oh, he did one thing to make it look like he had defected, and now he's making it look like he's behind the kidnapping too, and he's making it look like he got kidnapped. And it's like, what are the motivations going on here? There's like a point where Bond asks him, like, you're not going to be able to defect. Nobody's going to let you defect now or whatever. And Georgy says something to the effect of, like, he has some weird saying,
something
like always a soldier, or always, what does he say? I don't even remember what, like it doesn't explain what he's doing. It's just a saying that, it's lost to me what that saying is supposed to mean. And it makes it even more confusing that Bond's like, we have a saying too, and you're full of it. And I was like, what? I'm lost. I'm completely lost now. And especially when they drag the Mujahideen in this thing, when they drag them into the picture, and it's like, though they're selling opium to Georgy so that Georgy can profit off it. He can sell it on the streets, and then I guess he's supposed to use that money to buy the arms from Joe Don Baker, and then he's supposed to give those to Russia, but Russia doesn't want him alive because he's embezzled money from them. And I'm just, I look, there may be an absolute total explanation of what Georgy is doing in this movie, and I just missed it, and I'm sorry to the listener on that. There's some people out there who are probably the biggest Living Daylights fans there are in history, and they're like, oh, it's very simple to know what he was doing. But I don't know if it is.
I mean, you know the basics of it, and then obviously, like I said, there's that kind of twist towards the end where he actually was supposed to defect. It's like part of the plan or whatever that they had. But no, it that's what I'm saying. I guess we should say that the villains are a lot more simple as far as, like, their motives and what they're trying to do. They're not trying to, like, eradicate the world's water supply or whatever. But the story is convoluted. It's like, it's really, and a lot of this, and I am going to do talk about the book a little bit later, but there's not a lot to talk about the short story. But the like first, like, 20 minutes, like, leading up to him not killing Miriam Diabo, like all that is pretty, like that's fine, like all that's pretty, stays together well, and but that's also where kind of the adaptation ends, and then they're just creating shit after that, and it kind of feels like that at times. I do like this movie. I don't remember anything about what I thought of it as a kid. I watched License to Kill a lot more than I watched Living Daylights as a kid. I know I did. It was just the more, I don't know. It was the more like, it had like kind of bigger, it flowed better, I guess, from a kid standpoint. Right.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that next week, obviously. But I do like this. I think Dalton's great. Dalton's a theatrically trained actor. Like, I agree that Craig might be a little better than him as far as acting goes, but like he's Dalton, and Connery's obviously very good, but like Dalton is a really good actor. Whether that doesn't necessarily make him a great Bond, but I think he's fine. I do agree with you, and I did read him say that the way he was kind of flippant about the James Bond thing was purposeful. Because he didn't want to feel like he was just he wanted it to feel more natural. And I think he's on the phone and somebody just kind of asks him like, who is this or whatever. Yeah. And he just answers them because he's just like, I would just tell him my name. He didn't say anything about the shaken, not stirred. So I don't know why he did that one, but I know at least that one was purposeful. And also that pissed a lot of people off the way he said it. Cause it's kind of like, when Luke Skywalker chucks the lightsaber in, the beginning of Last Jedi. It's Last Jedi, right?
Yeah, it's Last Jedi.
That pissed a lot of people off because they weren't really thinking about what that actually meant. But anyways, but it just kind of reminds me of that. So like I guess I can see why people would get irritated if they've loved this character and they like this guy's. It was supposed to be Pierce Brosnan. Now it's the second guy, which is not even really the case, but that's how it was read. And then he's being super, like, just flippant about this shit. And I wouldn't say this is, like, super dark. Like, this isn't, like, what the Craig movies get to. But compared to all of the Roger Moore ones we've just sat through, and Never Say Never Again, and Diamonds Are Forever even, I mean, it feels really a lot darker. Huh?
Really dark is License to Kill. That's the one that gets...
that's definitely darker than this. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But as I was getting to when I was talking about, like, the weird Georgi motivations and all of this. As I was saying, like the Bond movies, I don't think have ever been like this plot's supposed to be coherent. They're just really just trying to set up all these awesome stunt work and action sequences and everything. I think at this point I'm a little skied out on these movies. There's so many ski sequences that they've done. It's almost like John Glenn is asking for it. He's like John Peters and the Spider and all of those movies that Peters and Goober were gonna do. Oh my God. But he does a ski scene, it seems like, in every one of these movies. So I'm skied out on those. Now, all that other stuff, I love all these other little sequences that go in here. The car going into the houseboat thing and going around that. I mean, it's ridiculous, but the tire tread getting off of the car and like I love that. He cuts the circle through the ice and he gets that one to sink. It's really cool. And the car is loaded with gadgets. Yeah. And he has a whole bunch of stuff. He's got the one thing where he whistles. And, he can either have the smoke come out, the knockout gas come out, or it's a bomb, depending on whatever you do. But anyway, I've never thought that they've done a lot of these plots where it's like, okay, you don't really have to follow exactly what's going on. But for somebody who's trying to make sense of what all the characters are doing, it becomes really hard. And he's supposed to, that's what's kind of fun about this. He's supposed to kill Kara, the Miriam Dabo character, and he's supposed to kill Pushkin, the John Rhys Davies character, but in both instances doesn't do it. He makes a call, and it's a weird thing about Bond in this and I think it continues in License to Kill. He's not really like married to like the job really in these things. He likes the License to Kill part. and he likes the like being he's just really kind of his own character, and that's a sort of a reflection of the 80s, I think, too, where you have all these cop movies that are out now where like, you know, you have the Lethal Weapons of the world, which came out the same year. You have all these like rogue cops who don't follow the rules and everything, and it's like a very 80s thing for this to, so I feel like that's part of it too. Like this Bond here would never have flown back in the Connery days.
No.
Like M would have like reprimanded this dude. Of course, you know, reprimanded. We've seen Connery get reprimanded many times, but it's never stuck. But I don't think Connery ever had the balls to do some of the things that the Dalton one does. Maybe I'm not looking into this, but it seemed like Bond always sort of went by the rules, like to a point. I mean, there were things that he obviously, like, he would do extracurricular activities, but like the not killing people when they've told to kill people, he does that twice in this movie
and doesn't get fired.
Yeah, he doesn't get fired, and then he stages that one with John Rhys Davies where he's just like, all right, we're gonna put some blood packets on you, and we're gonna stage your death for the whole world. Like, I don't know how that plays at MI6, right? Like everybody's seen your face and everything, and you're like wanted. Like, how does that work on a world scale? I don't know. The movie doesn't have, you know, doesn't care about those considerations.
No, you're right, though. Connery, he would go against it sometimes, but I mean, Connery and Elm almost felt like a father-son thing, like the way they, you know, no, Dalton's very different, the way he goes about doing the role. But I like, that's part of why I like it, because it is different. Like, if they had just turned him into Connery or more, I don't think it really works. And I think he should have been in more than 2 movies. I mean, I think he should have at least been in a few, but I think once they realized that they had to reboot, you had to just take the whole, you know, was the throw the baby out with the bathwater, that old we'll talk about it probably. We probably won't talk about it till we talk about GoldenEye, but they were planning on making a third Dalton film. Like, that was always the plan, even after License to Kill didn't exactly light the world on fire, but other things happened, because that's one of the longest gaps in between. But anyways, as far as this one though, I agree. There are things I don't like about it. The villains, there's too many villains. None of them are interesting. I like the actors doing in the roles. Even Joe Don Baker. Like, Joe Don Baker's fine. He's been in stuff that I've liked, but like, he's just such a nothing character in this. And he's like a
right.
He's like such a buffoon. Like, I don't even know how he's the guy in charge of all this stuff, or how he has not been arrested yet. Bond gets a drop on him super easy. So I got nothing.
Yeah.
You're right about the ski scene. I don't care much about that, but I do kind of love the part where they go past the customs or whatever, and he's like, "We've got nothing to declare," and then you hear Miriam Tiago go, "Just a cello," like from the distance.
That's really cool.
It's so silly, but it just that's one of the few things like always sticks in my head. And I love the car chase. I love the pre-title sequence is a lot of fun, even though it ends up just being a test.
It's very good. Yeah. That pre-title sequence is great. I do like the whole orchestra thing, and you know, he has that asshole agent that's like who's with him during that thing. It's like, this is my job. This is my operation. Saunders. Yeah, who does? This is another thing about these Bond movies. There's a point where like Saunders is fucking worthless or whatever, and then like at the carnival scene, he like has his one moment to shine where he's like, oh, by the way, Whitaker's the one who bought that cello for her and all that, and like, oh, that connects Whitaker with Georgi and everything, and it's like, oh, you've shown your usefulness now you're dying, you're gonna die, and I'm sitting there going, Bond could have figured that out himself. I don't know why he needed this dude to like figure out that Whitaker bought the cello and everything. Bond could have done that on his own. So like, it's always like, as always, if you help Bond in these movies, you're gonna die.
It's funny though, the Saunders thing, speaking also of the Casino Royale and everything, like the Craig films, Saunders seems like a precursor to the what's that, the Rory what's his name, is it Rory Kinnear? Yeah, Rory Kinnear, who plays, like, he's in some of the Craig films. He's kind of like M's like right-hand person or something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I know you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, he's a character actor though. He's in a ton of things. Rory Kinnear. Yeah,
but he plays Tanner in the Craig films, and I don't know that Saunders reminded me of Tanner or so, but Tanner is actually a much more interesting character, probably because you have a better actor. I don't know, or it might be
Rory
the writing.
Kinnear was also in that movie Men that came out last year.
Probably,
it was like
where he plays everybody. Well, I don't know. Is that a spoiler?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know.
Now I want to talk about Men.
It's not. It's not really. It's not really a spoiler.
But yeah. So and then like we were talking about the card. There's a lot. I think this one works almost solely on the action sequences, and Dalton's at times. His approach is interesting. Sometimes it doesn't work. I agree. I think the way he just kind of flipped, like he should have just not had to say that martini line.
Yeah, I agree. If you're going to make a different Bond and you've decided, yes, this is going to be a more serious Bond, more grounded into the books, which is what Dalton was saying. Like he read some of the books to make it more like the Fleming and everything. Like if you're going to be that way, then throw out the ones that we know from Connery and Moore and all that, and just be your own dude at that point.
And even like they didn't give him too many, but every now and then they still give him like a witty reply. Like there's one where when they ask what happened to who is he fighting with on the plane?
With the what's his name? The Necros.
Oh yeah, and then somebody said like what happened to Necros, and he says he got the boot. Like that, it just doesn't work when the way Dalton.
It does not work at all because you're like that's somebody that's like a dramatic actor trying to do a comedic actor work or whatever or whatever.
Which is weird because Dalton can be really funny. Like if you've seen Hot Fuzz, I mean he's fucking great in that. So I don't.
But it's not the character. No. It's not the person playing it. It's the character that he's playing.
The way they've made this James Bond. Like I don't know why you even gave him one joke because he just I don't feel like they do that with Craig. So I think they kind of. I still like I'm saying. I think the Dalton movies give them lessons to take and like make the Craig movies more. Better. I guess. But I'm also not sure John Glenn is a great director after I've watched 4 of these that he's done like back to back to back. I mean, he's not terrible. Yeah. He's not terrible by any means. But like I just don't think he adds anything. Like everything's kind of flat and like I don't know. But I don't know that there's really like a Bond director that we've seen that's done a super better job. But
look at what he's made outside of the Bonds too. Like, is there anything there we'd consider like a classic that he's made outside of the Bond movies?
I can't remember right now what else he had done. I know I mentioned him the first time we talked about him, but
yeah, I mean, so I think that it's a guy who worked his way up as he was a first assistant or unit or whatever director, and he got this job and I didn't really like look to see like I wasn't really like paying much attention to what Glenn was doing, except weirdly during the scene where the plane crashes at the end, where they're watching the plane crash. It was really weird to see, like, they have this shot set up, and I guess the shot looked terrible after this point because they show the plane blow up, and it's like a split second you see the fire, and then they cut to a cutaway, of Dalton and Dabo looking at the crash, and then they cut back, and it's a bunch of flames and everything, and it's like you normally would just show that full explosion without any cutaways, and they just I don't know, some weird things going on there, but I think he's just more of an action guy, and like I think action scenes get a lot of love, and like everything else, like characterization and like how people are playing a certain thing, that's probably not his strong suit.
Probably not.
So I think if you look at all the different areas that the director's responsible for, he's good at action scenes.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And that's all you really need to be good at with a Bond movie, but a lot of other things kind of like fall by the wayside because of that, I think.
But I think these are probably his best action sequences that he's done so far. I don't even remember Like, I'm trying to think of, I mean, like, I know there was nothing on this level in View to a Kill. For Your Eyes Only and Octopussy, nothing pops in my head off the top of my head, but these are really good. But yeah, I don't really have I think this is a totally solid movie. I think it's like, it's probably in the middle of, my Bond rankings or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing horribly wrong with it, but there's also nothing like truly great about it. It's just the action sequences are really good. Dalton and Diabo, they have some chemistry. They're kind of fun together. Like I said, a lot of what Dalton's doing here, not a lot, but at least half of what Dalton's doing here is pretty interesting.
And let's face it, this is better than probably 60 to 70% of the more Bonds.
Yes. Oh, it's not as good as Spy Who Loved Me.
Not as good as that. And it's probably maybe on par with Octopussy, maybe.
Yeah, either it's about the same. Yeah,
and Live and Let Die, like Live and Let Die has its moments, except for we've talked about the halves, the tale of two halves with that movie, but it's definitely better than The Man with a Golden Gun. It's definitely better than For Your Eyes Only. It's way better than A View to a Kill.
Yeah.
So, this is a solid entry in the middle of all that.
And it's better than Diamonds Are Forever. It's better than...
It is, clearly.
It's better than You Only Live Twice. Moonraker, it's... Like I would put it kind of in that area, like Octopussy, Moonraker, Live and Let Die. I'd put it somewhere in the middle of all those. No, it's good.
What's funny is it's like theme-wise, or mood-wise, it's trying to be For Your Eyes Only, which was the one that was trying to get back to corral it back into being serious, quote unquote, and everything. But
it's not boring like that.
I don't know. Yeah, it's not boring like that movie.
It's never boring.
Exactly.
It's like I said, it's hard to follow the plot at times just because there's too many people that factor into everything, and it's just I don't know, like Pushkin, like I almost feel like that character doesn't have to exist. I seriously, maybe he does, but when
it
they
doesn't
would go
seem
back
like
to
he
him,
does.
I'd be like, oh yeah, John Rhys Davies is in this movie. I totally forgot about that. But anyways, so Leah, let's do our rankings. We are now going to rank this film in 5 different categories. Our scale will be based on something that Bond holds near and dear to his heart. As long as they are shaken and not stirred, that would be martinis. Each category, we're going to rank from 1 to 5 martinis, 5 being the best damn liquid that has ever passed your lips, 1 being the well liquor you had to settle for, or were too drunk to care that night. Our overall feeling towards the movie, the story, whatever. What would you rank that?
The story itself it's got good elements to it. It's got stuff that's, this is what we want. The kind of adventure that Bond we want to see Bond in, but I think there's just a little bit too much confusion for me. There's too many this is what he meant to do all along, and this is what his real motivations were, and everything. So there's too much of that going on. But all in all, I'd say this is like a 3.
I agree. I think this is what 3-star movies it's like a perfect example of a 3-star movie. Very solid, fun, afternoon watching a movie. Bond, I'll go first, I guess. I like I said, I agree with you that some of these lines don't make sense. That's not really Dalton's fault though, but I think overall he's really good. I'm gonna give him a 4 because I really like him in the role. Like he seems to be already really comfortable for the most part.
Okay. Yeah. I unfortunately I guess I have to weigh in the fact that I'm not sure if they knew what they wanted to do with Dalton. And there's a point there where I don't know if he's really in the movie that much. It's weird to say that.
Yeah.
He's the main character. But there's points in there where I'm I was halfway through the movie trying to remember scenes that he was in, and it's okay, yeah, he's in that beginning scene, and he's in the opera scene, but there's nothing that he has to say or he has a couple of lines. He tells Saunders, need to know basis and all that, which is what Saunders told him, and there's all that, getting even, whatever type of thing going on there, but And I was actually like sitting there like, have they done anything with this guy? They haven't like made him. You think about the beginning of the Craig Casino Royale, and think about how that just made him Bond immediately.
No, that's
the
better,
opening of that movie. And Brosnan even has a really good opening scene. In this scene, it's good scene. It's a really good scene, but it doesn't tell you who Dalton is as Bond yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It doesn't define the role. And the fact that they don't know what to do with him, whether they give him the jokes or not, they seem like they're kind of holding back, and then they give him the joke, and we know, okay, now we realize why you didn't give him the jokes, and all this type of thing going on. So I give him a 3. I think he's better than what a lot of people remember for sure. Him as an actor, I think, is a 4 for sure. What they did with the Bond character is a 3 overall.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
And then so anyway.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, I'm probably, like I said, I usually don't do half, so I might be closer to like a 3.5, but I rounded it up.
No, 4's good.
Yeah.
I can see a world with 4s, right?
That is a good point, though, about how you're right, man. Craig might have like the best first opening ever just because of that. Like, it's a real simple situation, but he just like, oh, that's Bond. You know, like,
yeah.
That's a good point. I'm like, actually, I haven't watched that one in a while. I'm looking forward to revisiting that one. Because that's another movie I think you could argue is it could be a story of two halves, but I don't know. We'll talk about that in a few weeks. So our next one is the villain henchman.
Yeah, this is bottom of the barrel, unfortunately, and with a lot of great actors involved.
I know,
too.
it's crazy.
It depends on what you think about
Solid
Joe
actors.
Baker, I guess. Yeah, solid actors, and Jeroen Krabbe. I mean, it's a guy who, I've seen The Fugitive 100 million times, and he's great as Charles Nichols in that movie. The villains are 2. I would say maybe.
Yeah, I'll do that too because the actors are good enough. It's just there's too many of them. Like I don't even know like half the time who we're supposed to be focusing on. I don't really know. I guess Yorgie's the main villain, kind of, but I don't know.
is. He is. Ultimately he is, but like
they have to do that thing where we think he's good. Speaking of another thing, they pull off a lot better in a future Bond film. If I'm remembering correctly, it's one of the Brosnan ones, but where you think somebody's good and then they end up not being. And
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I recall that being pulled off a lot better than.
Yeah, definitely was. And you have, and I know in classic Bond, the classic Bond is that somebody like Necros is going to be that he's going to be a henchman. He's not going to be the main. But I do believe Andreas Wisniewski could have been like a main Bond villain if he wanted to.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like you didn't know what you had there almost. Like I think if he had done Die Hard at this point, maybe they would have like tried to make him the big villain. I don't know. But that's the guy who makes it a 2 for me because like he does all the cool stuff in this movie. He does all the like cool villain stuff, and it's a lot of fun. But like Joe Don Baker's got it's not as good as he has. Joe Don Baker has all the traits of somebody who is that megalomaniacal guy.
Yeah.
They just don't let him do anything.
No.
And then of course Georgi is just kind of like back and forth. I don't know what to think about this dude. So anyway,
no one feels that dangerous. Like it never really feels like there's these stakes. Like I guess that I felt another like even like I don't know. It's just it's odd. I'm with you. I'm on it too. The gadgets. So we have quite a few in this, as we already mentioned. We've got like the ghetto blaster weapon, which I was sad they didn't.
Which that was a thing, by the way. That was in the behind the scenes, because Prince Charles and Princess Di were there for that shooting.
Yes.
Shooting the ghetto blaster. I'm not sure what I feel about that name these days.
That's a good point.
But because they were making it for the Americans too, and I'm like, oh, that didn't age well. But the day that they shot the so-called ghetto blaster, they had Prince Charles press the button that shot the rocket. And everything. And then apparently there's a really famous photo, and I didn't follow a lot of the royal family, especially back in 1987 when I was 10 years old. But there's a famous photo of Princess Di smashing one of those like breakable bottles over Prince Charles' head. And apparently Jeroen Krabbe was the one who told them to do it, told her to do it.
I did not read that. That's interesting.
So there's a picture, there's a famous picture of her smashing this bottle over Prince Charles' head, and Jeroen Krabbe is sitting there laughing in the middle of them.
Yeah, and I know some of the royal family was at the premiere too. I don't remember if Di and I don't remember if it was them or it was like, somebody, another princess or something. I can't remember, but there was some of them were at the premiere. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know. Yeah. There's the key fob. That's the thing that he whistles. Yep. And it can emit stun gas. It can, I guess, cause an explosion. It can do all kinds of things. I don't know. It's like, what if Bond couldn't whistle? Like, what? Like what?
Yeah.
Like that seems like a very that weapon would have no use to me.
No, yeah, and it's I think that's a dumb way to operate a weapon too. I mean, just in case. I mean, a wolf whistle. Are you saying that nobody can wolf whistle around you? Like, whatever. I guess you have to activate it first before you whistle. I don't know, but it seems really dangerous to have something like that around.
And I thought it was cool too, which I don't remember. I guess he does use them, but the keys also, they work as lock picks. They can open anything basically. The car has all kinds of shit, shoots lasers, shoots rockets. It's able to cut ice.
Yeah.
Drive with a flat tire.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a ton of stuff that they could do.
And then, so there was all that kind of the gadgets are like a 3 for me. I mean, there was enough stuff in here. None of it was like where I'm like, that's awesome. The key fob is fun, but it's real silly.
I think these gadgets are a lot of fun. Actually, I would probably give them a 4 because they really loaded it up this time with a lot of fun stuff. And I don't remember License to Kill having much because he's playing a rogue agent in that one for a lot of it. But like once Brosnan starts, I think they really start ramping it up. Yep.
And then the song is our last thing we got to rank. Aha's Living Daylights.
Oh, man. And look, I love Take On Me, guys. And that's the best thing I can say about this song. This is not as... I would say this is not as boring as some of the ones that have come out in the 80s. And I know you love A View to a Kill.
I think this makes you appreciate A View to a Kill more because A View to a Kill, this is definitely trying to copy A View to a Kill.
Yeah. This is definitely not as good as the Duran Duran. It's probably better than the previous two, like the Octopussy one and For Your Eyes Only. Yeah. It's probably better than both of those, but it's not a very memorable one. Like if you go through the pantheon of artists who've done Bond, you're going to be hard pressed to come up with Aha probably. Because this song is not memorable. And even the song at the end, I guess they decided that this Aha song wasn't memorable, so they're like, let's do that Pretenders or whatever.
And Chrissie Hynde, very talented, and it's not her fault. It's just a bad song. So what were you going to give it?
Oh, this is a 1.
Yeah, I agree. I'm giving it a 1. I didn't like this at all. Like I said, it just felt like they were like, oh, View to a Kill, Duran Duran, let's just go get Aha to do the same thing.
Right.
And the only thing I'll say positive about it was I liked the way they incorporated it into the score sometimes. Like it has like a nice, it worked in the score, but like the opening credits were just terrible. And
it just doesn't. Yeah.
All right. So our final segment, which I don't have much to say on this, but we'll just mention a few things. But our final segment is called The Spy Who Reads Me.
Reading is one of my very favorite things to do.
Whoa! I'm not reading that crap. Summarize it in one word.
Now you want to talk about reading? Let's talk about reading.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
And I will say this is going to be one of the last times we probably have this segment because after this, between this and Casino Royale, I don't think anything is based on much, other than they take parts from other novels. But But anyways, yeah, the segment's called The Spy Who Reads Me. Cinemasins might have taught you that the book doesn't matter, but for this segment, we're willing to concede it at least kind of does. We are going to give you the nitty-gritty on what is similar to what you saw on the screen, what is different, and there will be plenty of what the hell was Ian Fleming smoking when he wrote this. This is pretty straightforward, though. So this is a short story. We've talked about this collection before because this is in the short story collection called Octopussy and the Living Daylights. So the story is pretty simple. Bond is assigned to eliminate a KGB assassin codenamed Trigger, who has been dispatched to kill him in the area that he's at, which I can't remember exactly where he goes. Maybe he's in Russia. I can't remember. But anyways, where he's at, there's an orchestra that plays every night while he's waiting for this person so he can kill them. And he notices this beautiful blonde woman that, plays a cello, which ends up being the Miriam Diabo character in the movie. And then he eventually finds out that she's the sniper, which is also what happens in Living Daylights. He adjusts his aim at the last moment, though, and he just shoots the weapon from her hands. And that's pretty much all that happens. But he... So it's basically the first 20 minutes of the movie or whatever is the short story. It's not a bad short story though. It's actually it's well written and it's interesting. It's all pretty much from Bond's perspective, so that's kind of interesting at times, just what he's thinking about, what he's doing, all that kind of stuff. So I would recommend the story, but it just doesn't have a lot of bearing on the movie other than like I said, those first 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And there's nothing even about they're trying to get a Russian defector out, all that stuff. It's simply this person they found out is maybe going to kill Bond or is maybe been assigned to kill Bond. So they want to send him after her first. That's kind of what it is. Mm-hmm. So there you go. That's our show, guys. Internet problems and all. We still got through it. So yeah, thank you for joining us this week. We hope you will join us again next week when we will talk about License to Kill. Also, before we go, we have social media. You can reach us on Twitter. We are at GoldSpy007. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter. I am at SamLoomis13. You can email us at golddiamonddeath007@gmail.com. And if you like this podcast and other things under the Cinemasins brand, we also have a Patreon you can join at patreon.com/Cinemasins. And if you have a second to leave us a 5-star review at your podcast listening app of choice, we would appreciate it.
Yes.
And it's going straight for your heart, Chris.
It's going straight for your
heart. Gladys Knight's
heart.
going to tell you all about it. Also, love Gladys Knight. I'm not making fun of Gladys Knight, by the way.
Yep. Absolutely.
But we hope you join us for that. I can already tell that's going to be a fun discussion. Until then, keep the martinis dry and shaken, the Baccarat shoe moving, and the Aston Martin fully gassed. This is Chris Atkinson and Jonathan Watkins signing off, and we will see you next mission.